What is up, Lightfighters? Welcome back to the channel. This is, as always, Lightfighters Anonymous, the show where the tactics are made up, the techniques do not matter. And the first rule of procedure is we do not talk about procedure today. I have something that I am very excited to bring to you guys. In front of me here is my beautiful 37mm grenade launcher, which I have to be honest with you, I bought only for the vibes. Today, I'm going to be showing you guys how to take these things out of the backyard and make them more than just a novelty or a firework shooter, and actually make some real training projectiles that you can use to enhance your training at home.
Eagle 2, this is Lightfighter 1-1. How copy, over.
Contact!
1-1, this is Eagle 2, good copy, send traffic, over.
Alright guys, so this is my TAC 79. This is made by Ordnance Group out of Sarasota, Florida. And this is a 37mm projectile launcher, flare launcher, smoke round launcher. And these are completely legal to own for civilians. Mine is obviously modeled after the old M79, typically called the Thumper, the grenade launcher that was made famous in tons of Vietnam War movies, or by Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator. I've got to be honest, I completely bought it for those vibes. However, ever since I've owned it, I've been trying to find a purpose for it, or find a way to utilize it. During our force-on-force training events, that's one, not going to get anybody hurt, and two, going to be a little bit more fun and add another level of realism. So when we start talking about utilizing 37mm for training purposes, we immediately run into some limitations. The first and most obvious is that our projectiles are just not going to have the effects down range as a real destructive device would, like a real 40mm high explosive dual purpose golden egg will downrange. Also, they're not going to have as much lift charge or as much weight. So we're always going to be battling the trajectory, or call it the marksmanship or the gunnery of this device. It's never going to emulate the real thing very well. And that is just because emulating the real thing very well is just deemed not safe for us civilians. So we are limited to one, smaller projectiles in both diameter and circumference, the 37mm projectile and load and cartridge, as well as we are limited to a certain amount of total grain weight of black powder in this. Now, go read a book about it, but I think it's around like 106 grains of total grain weight. When I make my training rounds, I don't even get close to that, so I'm not worried about it. So basically, we run into a serious marksmanship and gunnery problem right off the gate. These things just don't simulate the real thing very well. So what we like to do when we train with these things or implement these into patrolling training is we don't worry about marksmanship. Close enough counts. Basically, we are LARPers, so we have observer controllers in the fields. And if you are able to, carry this into the field, keep it clean, keep it ready for the fight, keep it supplied with ammo, and then, follow a specific manual of arms to implement it and use it in a fight, we will then adjudicate the effects on target without having to blow any of our friends up. So in addition to that, you guys know that I am a hardcore LARPer, and when we're LARPing, oftentimes we have to be very cognizant of the OPO, even though they are notionally the bad guys. We don't want to hurt our training partners in any way that may ruin their work week following. So we need to be really cognizant of any real projectiles that are going downrange. Make sure the OPO knows that they're coming and they're prepared to receive them. No homo. So I want to stop for a second and talk about the commercially available rounds. There are a lot of commercially available rounds you can buy right off the shelf for these 37mm launchers, and they're very cool. Some of them have like CS gas and pepper blast in there, but I don't even want to talk about those. I'm talking more about your starbursts and your clusters and your flares. I have what's right here, one that I particularly like called a signal source flare. This is a sonic signal, or it's like a big boom. It basically launches out almost like an M80 that makes a big report. These can be used, or they've said to be used as diversionary devices and stuff like that. I'll cut to some B-roll of me shooting this one. I don't think they're personally very impressive.
We're gonna divert the bears, boys. First time this thing is shot, so if it kills me, we're on documentation here. Hi-yo. Oh, that's it? Fucking gay.
However, still, when you are shooting any of these commercially available rounds, oftentimes what you're paying for is, the spectacle and the big boom. So typically I found that every commercially available round has a projectile that is traveling, and while it's traveling, it is one, burning, and two, might explode again, and that is dangerous. So while these are fantastic simunitions for like artillery sims to be shot in the air, or just something to utilize in a safe environment or a safe up and down range trajectory to simulate either a 37 millimeter or some sort of heavier weapon being utilized, I really don't like utilizing these explosive rounds or anything that's going to be burning as an anti-personnel simulation, all right? So after a bunch of research in the garage here and testing this on my friends, I came up with what we kind of think is a decent solution for implementing the 37 millimeter in your training. And that is these little hollow plastic 3D printed projectiles. Now you'll notice that these things look very much kind of like a little golden egg that would be normally in a 37 or a 40 millimeter grenade launcher. However, these are hollow plastic. They don't even really weigh an ounce. They're just under an ounce of plastic. They are hollow, and you do need to be particular that they're hollow because when you start making solid projectiles, the big boys at the ATF sometimes consider that a baton round or designated as an anti-personnel round. So what this is a hollow round designed for a chalk payload, but we just don't even bother putting the chalk payload in there, and we leave it hollow. We then take this into our standard 2-inch plastic shells, and then I'll show you how to load one of these here in a minute in the video. We put these together, a little Teflon tape, and about a 45 grain lift charge, and that gives us a pretty good boom, and it launches this projectile at what I'd say, I don't have a chronograph, I'd say it's close to a paintball speed, about 300 feet per second. Now, if you accidentally discharge this into your buddy's head while it was sitting across your rucksack on patrol, it is going to cause an injury. It's going to hurt him. Is it going to kill him? As a medical professional, I don't think so, but I have to say maybe, always. But I do think that this is a safer projectile to be utilizing in a training situation. Now, before I go showing you how to make one of these, I'll go ahead and show some B-roll of me shooting this. All right, this one is 55 grains powder. Probably not your state. I have no clue where that went. Went that way. It's too much smoke. So 55 is a little much. Let's go ahead. My ears are ringing a little bit. I like 45 a lot better. Let's go ahead and got another 45 there. That might be a little bit more safe. Let's shoot the 65. They're a little bit spicy, I warn you. Oh, these plastic holes need a little bit of pull to them out. All right, 65 grains of lift here. Here we go. Again, same 15 degrees. Hopefully you guys can see this. And that one flew a lot shorter. The wind really caught it and it fell short just left of the stick pile there. That one went about 70 meters again. And wasn't as big of a boom as the last 45. It scared me. So that really tells you, load them well. You gotta load these things pretty well, push down on them, get some good compression in there. And finally, this is another 45, guys. For this one, I'm gonna go ahead and shoot some drywall for you so we can see what kind of damage this thing does to some drywall. Just something very relatable. All right, guys, this is a little bit more for informational purposes. I do totally understand people are not made of drywall. However, I've set up a piece of 1/2-inch drywall here on my range, and we're going to kind of see what kind of damage one of these training projectiles that I make that we use at our training events will do to a piece of 1/2-inch drywall at pretty much point blank range, because I don't want to miss, and these things aren't super accurate. So just kind of a good medium that everyone understands, 1/2-inch drywall. I'm going to just step up here. We're going to be at like 5 meters tops, not even 5 meters here. We're at 7 feet, and I'm going to blast it. Here we go. Oh, it's failure fire again. So we had a little bit of a light primer strike, which I've found happens with this again. I just cocked it back, gave her a rip. I'd go with instructions. As you can see, she hits pretty hard. Wouldn't want to get hit with that up close. All right. Let's take you guys up here and check out our hole we made. Pretty good little guy there. Come around back. Got it propped on some wood. And then our projectile's out here back somewhere. Let's go find it. As you can see, we get a nice bang, a nice cloud of smoke, and the projectile travels, I'd say on average with 45 grains of lift. I'd say at a good arc, you get easily 100 meters of travel. And at the tip of that arc, you know, you're getting significantly affected by the wind because this is just a very lightweight projectile. I think that just keeps everyone downrange much safer. And then obviously when we are implementing these in training, anyone who's issued one of these or brings one of these to the training event is known not to point this directly at people. This is more of kind of an area target or a hard point target where we allow it to be used on specific vehicles or groups of people further than 100 meters away, stuff like that. But never pointed directly at a human being and, you know, shot right at them. Always kind of at an upward trajectile. Other than that, as these things kind of hit that top of their peak of their projectile and fall to the sky, they're very light. Now, could this leave a black eye? Absolutely. But other than that, I don't think this will cause any significant damage to you. And I've already been volunteering to get shot at a few times on my friends. I just haven't been hit yet. All right, guys, I might be out of frame for most of this, but we're going to talk about these little blue eggs, how I load these training projectiles, and how you can too. First off, while we were making these, I wanted something that was both fairly safe for use and repeatable. And repeatability for me means affordability. So I didn't want to be spending like the 40 or 25 or whatever dollars per round that these commercial things cost. So I definitely wanted to get into making these. To do so, I ended up buying a lot of crap, as you can see here. I'm going to kind of go through it really quick just so you guys don't make the same mistakes that I made. I ended up buying a couple different styles of projectiles that maybe I thought would work better than one another. However, the ones I found that work just great are these ones right here. I'm working with Klein, it's Small Team Supply, Klein Machining, to 3D print these and have these available for sale with this 3D print file. For a good price. However, let me dig through this box here real quick and I'll show you some of the other things that I bought that I would say maybe to get or not to get. So first thing are your shells. These are just the plain old injection molded shells. These are poured out for a 209 shotgun primer right here, and you'll find that the 209 primer is pretty standard in 37 millimeter. These shells are great. That's what I'm going to be using for the load today. However, an upgrade from these shells would be metal or aluminum shells. You'll see that these ones are both prior shot signal source flares that I shot. I got these in like a 10 pack, so I shot a few of these. And these are perfectly good for reloading. I want to make notice that I've cut these ones down to better accept these projectiles that I like shooting. So I've got a couple of them that are still long, still made for, you know, whatever I want to shoot out of there, if not. But right now I cut a lot of these down just so I'd have these. One other advantage of these milled shells, sometimes you can get them with a milled powder bushing in the bottom, and I don't know how well the camera's picking that up, but a powder bushing is basically, here, it's another piece that I bought. It looks like this. And what it does is just a little cup that's hardened, it sits in the bottom of your shell that centers all of your powder over your shotgun primer. These pieces are critical. So if you do end up buying just the injection molded plastic 2-inch holes, you need to buy the powder bushings. They're a requirement, okay? I know I tried going a while without them. You just have to buy them. And these just fit right in there with some hot glue. I'm gonna be doing that in a minute while my hot glue Glock gets warm. So aside from the powder bushings, which I've got one sitting in the shell, here's one right here. I think these are absolute musts. You should buy these. Some other things I bought are just some like 37 millimeter sealing caps. These were very cheap, like $3.99 for a 10 pack, and I didn't have to cut them out, which is nice. You can cut your own out of cardboard, of course. Also here in the bigger box, we've got some O-rings. These things are sometimes good for sealing up cardboard holes. So if you wanted to add like a payload in here, you could shoot this actual hole, cap it, fuse it, and then use that O-ring to make it seal a little bit in there. I'm not using these cardboard holes for anything. I did buy a bunch of them, but we're just not going to be sending any payload that's going to explode downrange. We have a couple of them. So these O-rings, again, you don't need to buy these either if you're not going to be doing that. Also, we went ahead and bought a couple of these 37 millimeter kind of push cups. These are designed to sit in the bottom of your shell, and these sit at the bottom of your load and just kind of work like a shotgun wad and keep your projectile together and push it out. I find that these are pretty just spectacularly loud when they burst all on their own with a shotgun primer. So if you wanted to just push one of these, I think it'd be fun to push one of these in, load it with some like talc powder and push another one on top, and then you just have just like a big talc bomb launcher. You might try that. All right, so guys, of these pieces that I bought that I'd say you should buy if you're trying to make the training rounds I'm trying to make, you don't need the cardboard projectiles, the O-rings, you really don't need these burst discs. If you ended up with milled aluminum shells that have the milled powder bushings in there, you don't need powder bushings. However, if you just buy the injection molded plastic ones that are ribbed here down on the bottom, you definitely need to buy the powder bushings and hot glue those into the bottom, and then you can load your projectiles. Now, when it comes to projectiles, I really like these over these longer style ones. I feel like the fins and everything, just they don't have a weight to really travel far enough well. So these ones just do just fine on their own. I like these a lot. You don't need the little push caps. Those are just for sealing other little things that you may want to make, but it's just something to have. So really all you need is a good shell with a powder bushing in it, your projectile, and then some black powder. This is just some FFG. I hear a lot of people use triple F, but do not use flash powder in these things at all. Along with your powder, you need a safe way to disperse and measure your powder. We just get pretty close with just the scoop and our eyeballs. We don't use our little fancy measuring device too often. And then also you're going to need some 209 shotgun primers. So let me clear this space a little bit, and I'll get you zoomed in, and we'll show you how to make one of these training rounds. All right, guys, so I've cleared my space here. I'm going to show you guys how I go about loading up these training rounds that we use in our simulations here. First thing you do is you got to start with the correct shell or an appropriate shell. It needs to be clean. It needs to have a powder bushing of some sort. You'll see that this one doesn't have one in yet. I'm going to show you how to put that in. This one is cut to 2 inches and has a milled powder bushing, so this one's pretty much ready to load. And this one is actually like a 3.5 inch shell. This one is used just kind of right out of the box. It's like one of the sonic signals or whatever. And this one still has an old primer in there. We're not going to be loading this one today because I do need to cut it down still to load it the way I like it. And also I don't like cutting down all of my long ones in case I want to load something a little bit more exciting. I am going to go ahead and show you how to deprime these really quick. They can sometimes be a little bit tough. I go ahead and use one of these push pin blocks that you use with like any of your ARs or anything. Set it over there and make sure you get like an appropriate sized punch in there. And I just use my eyes. Whoop, that one fell right out. Well, I just use my eyes, typically center it right over there. And sometimes they come right out, as you can see. However, sometimes they can be a little bit of a struggle. So what I like to use is just a small ball peen hammer. I center that right over the center there. And then as I'm controlling this punch with my hand so it doesn't go too deep, I give it a good whack. And sometimes it needs a pretty serious, a pretty serious whack on there to get these primers popped out of there, especially if you shot it and you left it for a long time before you decided to try and reload that shell. Just be careful that you're holding your punch and you don't let it sink all the way down into the, widen out this primer hole. All right, so once you've got a deprimed shell, you need to go ahead and make sure it's clean. These don't have too much residue in there, and this one's brand new, hasn't been shot at all. However, this one does not have a powder bushing. So I've got a powder bushing right here. And the way to put these in is pretty simple. You just get out the old Lightfighter Arts and Crafts hot glue Glock, and you gob it in there. Now, there's not a really good technique I've figured to do this, but what I do is I just kind of ooze it into the corners and build a pretty big, messy little mess down there. And I'm kind of just turning this thing as I go. And I'm being careful not to get this super hot tip of this hot glue gun on this actual plastic printed shell. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm getting a little bit dripping down the walls. That's okay. Some's scooting over towards that primer hole, which would make you nervous, but it's okay too, because it's just hot glue and it's easy to get out of there. And then once you get the hot glue in there, you go ahead and push your powder bushing in there. Make sure your holes line up real good and you can see through it. And then just really push it down in there. Now, that's going to stay hot or that's not gonna be set until it cools off. So if you want to do a little hack like me, you can take this, go put this in the fridge, and make it set quicker. But if you're patient, you can just start doing another one. All right, guys, I went ahead and knocked out a couple of these shells, put the powder bushings in these ones that weren't already ready, and let them cool down a little bit with the hot glue. If you get a little messy with the hot glue, it's no big deal. You can just peel it off. When you get to this step, it's not a problem. If you have somebody or some in your little primer way there, I just grab a little punch and just push it out from one side and make sure you got a nice little path for your explosive material to travel through. So next thing is you take a single shell. I like doing these one at a time just so I don't have a bunch of risk of missing a step or leaving my powder open or causing any extra explosives to be unattended for any portion of the time. If you can open your primers, open one, get one single primer out, and then go ahead and place it in the bottom of your shell. Now you can typically just push these in with your thumb, but if you find that they're a little stubborn, on a clean flat surface, without your hand covering the top, you can generally just give it a couple good taps and you'll find that your primer seats perfectly in there right away. I like to go ahead and look in there and inspect, make sure my primer looks good, make sure I can see it, and make sure it looks like it's going to work. And at that point, I can get out my measuring devices here for my black powder. All right, I've got my scale zeroed here with my little tray on there. I want to let you know that I'm not going to be super precise with the my grain weight. I might be plus or minus 1 or 2 grains. But what we're shooting for with this projectile is 45 grains of powder. And this again is FFG. So it's 44.5, 45.7. A little over everybody. And then take that and pour it right into your powder well of your shell. And I like to just kind of skedaddle it around a little bit. At this point, make sure you don't drip sweat into your shell. I like to grab just a little piece of paper towel wadding, especially if your black powder doesn't fill up the entire well, and just push it right on top of that, maybe a little bit more, just as a wad in case this projectile doesn't completely seep flush against your black powder. Having good compressed black powder is critical to making these charges go off well. So once you've got some wadding in there, now you're ready to seat your projectile. What I've typically noticed is these projectiles are a little loose. However, if they're a little tight, you can take some sandpaper to the outside of them and give them a light sanding. I do this by hand with just some fine grit. If they're a little loose, which is what I more typically find, I tighten them up with some Teflon tape. So typically like 3 or 4 wraps of Teflon tape makes these projectiles sit really, really well in these shells, and then they are ready to go. So I like to just do a couple wraps of Teflon tape there, and then push them down and seat them nice and firmly into my projectile. And now you've got a pretty nice little loaded projectile, no rattle to that, and that thing is ready to go get shot off. One final touch I like to add a little bit when I'm making these is I take a little strip of painter's tape. I actually prefer using the thinner stuff or grabbing like a centimeter of painter's tape. That's not very tidy. I can do better than that. I like to just cut it down to like a 1/2 inch section, and then I just go ahead and seal these up. That way, when I'm being a goon with these, that'll prevent any water ingress or help prevent with any water ingress a little bit. And then it gives me an excellent place to go ahead and write like 45 grains of powder on there just for research purposes, in case I want to know in the field what I'm about to shoot. So I just put a little 45. You can put today's date on there, whatever you want to put about your little training rounds. All right, what is up, Lightfighters? I got a couple different rounds for you today. We're in the backyard. We're going to be shooting the TAC 79 with my training projectiles that I loaded myself. So if I explode, we at least have it on video evidence as evidence in what not to do. So first thing I'm going to shoot, guys,
This is a commercially available round. It's the sonic signal signal source flares. This is just a report at the end of a projectile. Typically, we don't like using these in simulations, again, because you're shooting a burning projectile that then explodes on your buddies downrange. So I'm going to shoot one of these just as kind of an example of what you get for comparison, commercially available versus my hand loads, just for range and kind of the sound of the report, just overall quality. So here we go. Hopefully, I'm going to be aiming for between the short two trees right in the middle of the screen. I think I framed this up decent so you guys should get a view. So here we go. Hopefully we can shoot. Here we go. First one's first. Yeah, that thing went about, I'd say, 50 to 70 meters or so. That was one of the lesser impressive ones that I put up shot. All right, so next thing we're going to shoot here is one of the ones I loaded. Now this is my training projectile, and we've got 45 grains of powder in here. Failure to fire, failure to fire. All right, this one is 55 grains powder. Probably not your state. Let's shoot the 65. They're a little bit spicy, I warn you. And that one flew a lot shorter. The wind really caught it and it fell short, just left of the stick pile there. All right, so this next one I got here is a little bit of, this is the first time for this. This is kind of like a flaming rock, if you will. A piece of engineering flag, yellow, spiraled up, taped into a piece of hollow cardboard, and then loaded up into a projectile. So basically we've got some orange hollow cardboard with a long yellow tail. Ideally this can be used for marking or signaling, some sort like that. But it's a flaming rock in a grenade launcher. Weapons on fire. Here we go. And some in my pond, and the flaming rock really didn't separate or tail at all. It all just stayed together like one big clump. So improvements to be done on that.
All right, guys, so just a couple of closing thoughts about this 37 millimeter. As you saw there, we had a couple of failures to fire. I've noticed that this particular unit just does light primer strikes ever so often. Whenever that happens, I just usually immediately recronk it and try to blast it one more time. And if that doesn't work, I usually hang fire for a second and then, you know, try to discard your round as quickly and as safely as possible. Again, the 45 grain projectile, I had a little bit, or the grain weight lift charge, I had a little bit of problems with. I went ahead and found that shell, and what I'd noticed is that my powder bushing just had a little bit of space and wasn't seated all the way against the back of the shell. So because that was already glued in there, I went ahead and threw that one away. That is a total waste. But again, your total package per shot is pretty affordable. A single primer, 45 grains of powder costs, you know, about a quarter. And then these holes, these 2-inch shells are reusable. You can usually get a few shots out of both plastic hole and the powder bushing in there. If you get the metal ones, they'll last a lifetime. And then these things do, if you can go find them, I was able to find a few of the ones I shot today. Granted, the one I went ahead and put 65 grains of powder in, it went ahead and just flew out the back end of that projectile. So another one for the trash. But again, these things are also pretty cheap. You can get these for around $5 to $6 a piece if you have to find them on Etsy. Or you can go to smallteamsupply.com and buy them from my buddy Mike Klein, who's printing them out and selling them for training guys like us. Guys, I hope this answers some questions about 37 millimeter. Kind of gave you some insight about how to incorporate it into training. Again, not the most safe thing when you're dealing with action projectiles and your living, breathing friends in the field. So be careful, be safe, be smart. Don't do what I do. And again, when you're loading anything like this, dealing with black powder primers, consult a real pyrotechnician. I'm not that guy. I can't even say it. So I just wanted to show you guys kind of what I do here in my garage to make some effective training rounds for sims, for LARPing, for FTXs, whatever you guys want to call it. And just another way to actually start incorporating these cool little 37 mils into our training and, you know, not having to risk burning down the forest or blowing off your friend's eyebrows. So guys, I hope this was fun. I hope you guys learned a little bit of something. Kiss your mothers, rock on, and stay sharp.